delighted to welcome you to the main edition of this Power Dialogue Renewable Energy Series. We've been holding this dialogue since July 2016 in Abuja, and this is our first time here, and we are honored that you decided to grace us with your presence. Well, we hold this dialogue for three main reasons. One is to share ideas and information about the power sector, and then we want to advocate policy positions that we have about the sector, and also to network, meet, share ideas and investment opportunities about the sector. So I'm going to give a brief description of how the dialogue is going to work. We're going to have 5 panelists, and for this month, we'll be discussing a case for mini-grid, for off-grid solutions, mini-grid and solar home systems in the Niger Delta. Well, basically, what we'll be doing is talking about the viability and challenges facing the adoptions of these renewable solutions in this region. And the following objectives for the dialogue would evaluate the extent of off-grid energy market penetration, would assess technical viability, economics, the risk, market condition, and financing for off-grid solutions in the Niger Delta, and we will discuss the potentials for off-grid acceleration in the Niger Delta and Nigeria as a whole. To drive this discussions this night, we have as moderator Mr. Patrick Okibo III. He's my boss. He's the founder and principal partner at Nextier Advisory. As a partner at Nextier, Patrick advises leaders across the Nigerian public sector on economic development policies, corporate strategies, revenue generation, and investment promotion. He has led various teams in multiple competency areas across a range of projects in Nigeria. He holds a bachelor's degrees in agriculture from the University of Nigeria and a master's in BA Business Administration from Emory University in Atlanta. He served on a number of boards and technical committees. He was part of the technical working group that developed Nigeria's 30-year integrated infrastructure master plan and the roadmap for the power sector reform. He was also the vice chairman of the technical committee of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Prior to founding Nextier, Patrick worked in consulting at Accenture, banking at Citigroup, corporate finance at Transcorp, and at government at the presidency. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for being here and thank you for gracing us with your presence. And welcome the moderator, Mr. Patrick Okibo.
Almost 13 months, I think. And this is the first time we're moving it out of Abuja, and first port of call is Port Harcourt. And I'm excited to be here for many other personal reasons I'm not going to share. But we're here thanks to Allon that's provided the sponsorship and the support. And on that note, I'd like to invite Jadeshola to speak a little bit about this partnership Nextier has got with Allon and why this session is important. Jadeshola.
I'll talk to myself. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jadeshola Rawa. I'm the Grants and Partnerships Associate, so please can have a round of applause for Shell. So this is directly Shell's money through Allon. So we're funded by Shell. We're very excited to partner with the Nextier Power Group. One of the reasons why we decided to do this is because this fits right into the alley of what we do. Our main focus is to invest small investments in off-grid energy firms. That's one. Second one is to create an enabling environment for finance. So in areas where we're not able to invest directly in these companies, then we can talk to some of the other big boys that have money and say, hey, look, this makes sense. How about we all pull some money together and invest in this company? So that's the second part of what we do. And then the third part of what we do, which directly relates to what I do, is creating an enabling environment. And that revolves around things like research and giving grants and then having conversations like this, advocacy. How do we change the policies? How do we, change regulations to favor the people that are working in this sector? So I'm not going to take up much of your time. I'm very excited to be here. This is technically my second time, but feels like first time in Port Harcourt, and I love it so far. Very excited to be here. We're going to have a great conversation, and I'm very excited to say that this is the first in a series of conversations that we're going to be having, and we hope that next time you invite other people to join us as well. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Clement is the lead project engineer at GVE Projects. GVE is one of the most innovative mini-grid developers in Nigeria. I'm quite excited about some of the projects they've done that we've seen, and I look to have a conversation around those. He holds a bachelor's degree in electrical and electronic engineering from Federal University of Technology, Owerri. as well as a master's degree in power systems and machines from University of Port Harcourt. So this is kind of the homecoming for you as well.
Sure.
Yeah. And he's been with GB since inception. Please, another round of applause. Bode Longe, please. Bode is the General Manager, Strategy and Corporate Planning at Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. He oversees strategy development and corporate performance reporting for the utility. He coordinates project development efforts. He's versed in project finance, transaction advisory, financial advisory, etc. Prior to joining ABC, he founded BL&C Limited, which is a boutique consulting firm of business and strategy experts. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in economics, first class, from University of Buckingham, and he's a chartered accountant and fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Please, a round of applause. With initiatives to drive community engagement, metering initiatives, debt collection, bulb exchange programs, etc. Chinedu also worked on the OSPAC, was a technical subsidiary that worked on the power bulb solar home systems, and they supported Ikeja Electricity with that, and he led the communications for Port Harcourt UNESCO World Book Capital. Please, a round of applause for him. Chris Newsom is a program advisor at Stakeholder Democracy Network. SDN is a civil society organization, consulting firm that works out of here at Port Harcourt. Chris has led extensively work in the Niger Delta on governance, environmental, power, conflict issues. He's worked with SDN on community and public engagements with the power sector and discussions and research on the merits of solar power. Chris has also supported research in the failure of solar-backed projects by government agencies such as NDDC and other actors. Please, a round of applause for Chris. So I guess the structure is, I'm going to give them, each of them, about 5 minutes, and I'll be timing, to make some opening remarks, questions, or comments, or contributions. As much as we want to listen to the panel, we're also very interested in listening to you. So permit me to start with you, electrical.
I'm from GB Project, as he rightly introduced. GB Project has developed so many mini-grids. We have currently about 13 operational mini-grids in Nigeria. And so the question is this economically viable? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. The reason being that Nigeria is populated with more than 180,000 people. It is no news that more than 50% has no access to electricity, and that was what actually gave us the insight into the building of the company. During our years of internship, we discovered that it wasn't just a hearsay. We have to see with our eyes that many communities are really, really off the grid. There are communities that are hard to reach, and there are communities that are hardest to reach. So with this, we came up with those innovative of how to bring up a solution that would solve the power problem and bridge the power gap. And that was what gave birth to GBE. And today we have invested more than, for our first phase of our project, we have invested more than $3.5 million. And for the second phase, which we are currently working on, we intend to invest more than $8 million. And this, our first phase, was targeted at building a generation system which is up to 0.65 megawatts, while the second phase targeted at 2 megawatt system, of which we are currently working on. The challenge is so far. 5 minutes is quite a short time for me to actually go into the details.
We'll have time during the conversation to get into all of that.
The challenge is so far. Right from inception, we have been faced with so many challenges, which borders around electricity theft, which we have been able to sort out, which borders around the fear of grid encroachment. Thank God for my colleague from the EDC here. We'll be able to sort out that too. Right now, we're no longer that scared of grid encroachment because we have a tripartite agreement with them currently. And so, I think, to me, the business is viable, the economics are fine, the challenges are surmountable, in terms of financing, we have been able to develop that confidence in investors over the years. We have moved from those times where people see solar system or mini grids as something that is not feasible to a time whereby we have built investor confidence. And so all of us here, young, old, that have interest in the mini grid sector, I don't think you have much of a challenge, because we have people from all on here that are willing to sponsor you, as you rightly heard from the onset. Get your business plan ready, do the proper research properly, and I tell you, you are good to go. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Please a round of applause. Is my information correct that you guys started GBE when you were doing your youth service, and the first project was here in Japan?
We started GBE when we were doing our internship.
Internship, okay.
Yeah, not really youth service. And our first project was in River State, Harcourt, Nextier local government area, Harcourt to be precise. Right now, we are trying to overhaul the system in order to report our pilot project.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
I think it's very interesting that we can have an occasion where a disco in Nigeria will sit on the same panel with a mini grid developer, and we'll be having an interesting conversation. So I think for us, it would be helpful to actually put into perspective, right? What was the journey like? What actually are the utilities view, ADC in this instance, about mini grid development? But I will start by acknowledging that this was only possible for us as a utility because the regulator in 2016 issued a regulation, the mini grid NERC 2016 mini grid regulation, which actually created a clear roadmap, a path towards a utility supplied from the main, interacting and collaborating with the mini grid developer. So I would say that's where it all started from. When we got this regulation, we were of course curious to know what was in the regulation, and went through the regulation, and it was clear to us that there seemed to be a very level playing field here. And I'm sure the developers, if we have some of them in the room, probably have gone through this regulation and probably know it as much as we do, or even better. But I will explain two things I found very interesting in that regulation. The regulator created two streams, right? And he said, okay, if you want to try your hands on some project, maybe 100 kilowatts system or less, just come to us and register. And then you can carry on and do whatever you need to do. Talk to the community, design your systems, implement. We will not bother you with price regulation and other things. But then it said, if you would design a system higher than 100 kilowatts, right, then you would need to approach us for a permit, okay? Not just getting a permit, you actually would have your tariffs as well regulated. So what we saw in the earlier days was most of the developers, right, decided to opt for the experimental scheme, the 100 kilowatts. And we brainstormed and we thought about this, and well, if you run a 100 kilowatt system, right, let's even presume you run this at 100% capacity utilization, which is hardly possible. If you charge your tariffs, let's say 150 naira per kilowatt hour, let's say, your monthly revenue is about 11 million naira. Think about it. I mean, for all your trouble going to the community, what will your overheads be as well? So it was clear that unless you bring some scale into the business, right, we may see that, as you rightly said, for GBE, very entrepreneurial individuals that start off the process, over a few years may just get discouraged, just because the returns are not what they should be. So this led us to say, okay, we actually want to piggyback on this regulation and also see how this would blend in with the utilities strategy. So two things we did as a business. We set up a mini grid desk. Okay, the mini grid desk is to say, well, if you're a developer, come talk to us, we will deal with you. However, think about it. The regulation says the maximum capacity for a mini grid is 1 megawatt, isn't it? Right? I have a utility that has a network capacity of 900 megawatts. So how many 1 megawatts would you need to develop to match the size of my current capacity. So it's clear that my current business, I must still focus on that. However, I need to also create a framework for the mini-grid development. So we set up a mini-grid desk. We got both internal and external capacity to support us on this. And we have a rigorous registration process as well. We want to know that you are a developer that has done something. We want to know that we actually can move forward with yourself. And I think that was how we're able to get to GBE. We are happy to be working with GBE. They are a developer of note in the country. Not just taking their words for it, we also approached the Rural Electrification Agency. Now, this is another agency that also has been stimulating the mini-grid development. Maybe you might have heard in the press that there were some sparks when the Rural Electrification Agency was trying to build some projects within some disco franchise area. In our case, we went to REA to say, how can we work on this together? In fact, we got the reference for a few developers from REA, and for the current project which we signed a tripartite agreement for, I'm pleased to mention that REA actually financed the study, right? The energy audit in the market was done by REA. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is, I think if all parties are willing to collaborate, we actually can have a solution, right? I want to say in closing that it is our first interconnected mini-grid. We hope it will be first in a series of many others that is to come.
Thank you very much. SDN understands the Niger Delta like the back of your hand. You've also done a study on solar systems that failed. Maybe you can talk to the potential for RE solar systems in the Niger Delta in your opening remarks.
Okay, so I don't want to poach too much on Chinedu's side of things in terms of the potential for the Delta. I think one thing to understand straight away is that solar power across Nigeria is still at a very, very young stage. So where we've seen reference to the Delta being behind other areas, I think the best reference I can give is if you can picture GBE, which is one of the more advanced companies in the country when it comes to mini-grids. If they're up to 13 mini-grids now, and you can picture the size of Nigeria, you can see something of the scope of the mountain that we've got to climb. Now, essentially, there are three types of solar systems that we see in the Delta. There's mini-grids of which you hardly have a presence, largely because the priorities for sponsoring mini-grids, because at this stage they are still needing significant sort of bridging support, has fallen outside of the Delta. So ironically, the first one from GBE is much more the exception than the rule. The second type of solar system that you see is that which private individuals have put in, and that's becoming more common. And I think it's going to play a particularly important role where it's not cheap, and essentially it's acting as a backup for those individuals. Quite often they're in urban areas, sometimes in semi-urban areas. But they're putting solar in as something that will give them power during the daytime, some carry over into the night, and they've got it set up so that if NEPA is there, they'll take that first. And that, if you went back as little as 3 years ago, you would have seen very, very little of that happening in the Delta. I'm sure that by now, most of you will have driven past an area where there's someone who's got panels on their roof, or is in your estate, or you've seen a system up close. Just to get a sense of our audience, can I just get a quick show of hands? Among all of you here, it's like who's seen a solar system of that type, a small home system up close? So not just on the roof, but from a background where you've had a little exposure to this, or a lot, if you're coming from that background. For the rest of you, I think I'll leave it to Chintu to sort of describe some of the issues we've had historically in terms of perceptions of solar in the Delta compared to other parts of the Delta, other parts of the country. But the perception of solar has been a real problem. And I'm just going to talk briefly about part of what's driven that problem. Is that we've had about 10 years of government projects incorporating solar, but generally in a very poor way. So unfortunately, solar has got caught up in bad quality government contracting, where something that should work very well has failed, and then the people have drawn the requisite conclusions. The most dramatic case of that has been water projects across the Delta, backed by NDDC, where the solar component has been reduced to something that is a fantastically robust sort of concept, where it's panels, no batteries, and a pump, and it pumps when there's light. Basically, not basically due to the solar component, but mainly either due to the water side of it, or very, very poor choices about who are the contractors on the solar side.
Sure.
I need to flick through the positive side. So looking forward, in terms of one thing that defines the Delta is you've got rural areas that are going to be beyond the grid that we can see now for the foreseeable future. And there's a very logical case, in a lot of cases, for them to stay that way. And what I mean by that is not in a negative sense for those communities, but that it will make more economic sense for everyone involved for power for those communities to be generated locally. What that means is that if you're looking at the efficiency of that generation locally, solar is almost certainly going to be a component of that. Now, for those of you that can remember, we've got a rainy season. That's something where I would say that what you need to think of is basically blended solutions, where you have three things going on. You've got your solar component, you've made a fairly solid investment in batteries, and then you have a generator as well. Sure. But depending on how you design the system, it can mean that the period that you can go without fuel from the generator side of it can be extended, and you can push it well into sort of a backup territory.
Yeah. Excellent. We'll come back to more of that, but let me get quickly to Chinedu.
I'd like to say thank you to you guys for bringing this here. Thank you to all for partnering. Interestingly, I've always told myself that one of these days I'm going to make a trip to Abuja just to attend this event, and then it landed here. Personally, from my perspective, I borrow a leaf from what the three gentlemen have said here. The first thing I've seen from GVE is they understand the need to reach beyond the urban, which is key. From AEDC, they understand the need for collaboration. And from what Chris has said, mediocrity in projects, affecting perceptions. Now, when it comes to our perspective at Spark, what we've tried to do in the past couple of years of our growth is we've grown from communications, which let us understand the customer, understand the sector, to actual services, where we've also engaged in the transactions, the money system. And then we evolved to solar home systems, which we started to deploy last year. Where we stand today, one of the biggest challenge to mini, micro, nano, off-grid is access to credit for the developer or the manufacturer, as the case may be, and for the end users. We all know how we exist in Nigeria. We've seen the battle about minimum wage, and we can easily work out in our head what the average Nigerian makes, the take home of the average Nigerian. So imagine when you're asking your potential customer to cough out 300,000 naira for 1.5 kVA system. Now, if you look at the heat map of Nigeria, as you descend, or let me not just descend, as you drop into the delta, it goes from red to yellow, and in the delta it's green. So optimal solar supply in the delta, 4 or 5 hours a day on the average. Thus, like Chris has pointed out, these systems have to be designed in such a way that there is no ultimate dependence on solar. We all know that a couple of days ago, the whole country had this shaky supply problem, where parts of the grid failed and all that. And for the first time in close to 3 years of my life, I didn't have an option. I just had to go and buy fuel and pour in my generator, because while that was going on, the rains were visiting Port Harcourt. So even though there was some light, I couldn't produce power. Right, so there's challenge, credit. There's challenge, knowledge. Like I shared with Body when we're outside, there's also a truth about power in Nigeria, which is we underproduce, thus the opportunity is. And on the customer side, it's not hard. As a customer, you go hear what? Because when it comes to power, we all fight for power. They may give us light. First question, can you afford it? Number two, when you have it for 24 hours, that's when you realize that 5K token runs out in 10 days. So you don't hear what that be. Then at that point, you realize that your stew that is in your freezer, once it's solid, it's solid. So nobody tells you to turn off the freezer. And Body chipped in something, said, what happens in the morning if light goes away? Right? Because you don't have reliability, you don't have guarantee. But at the end of the day, that is where the opportunity comes for either backup or alternative energy. And then, as we've heard, the need for collaboration for everybody in the sector.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, in our minds, there's this thing about, does the technology really work? So, I'd like you, Chinedu, to speak a little bit about the technology of solar home systems. Does it work? Right? And then I'll come to Clement to talk a bit about mini-grids and the technology. So if we can cross that technology, then we can get into other conversations. So solar home systems, what can it do for you?
It can do a whole lot. I know we've gone as high as 5 kVA systems at home.
And 5 kVA can power what?
We have a customer in Gulf Estate here, Port Harcourt, who uses his 5 kVA for his 2 horsepower AC.
Okay.
Now, Gulf Estate charges higher than normal. They are treated as a single customer by the DISCO, so they have a central generator. So he says that cost is going to kill him. So he bought that unit strictly for his air conditioning system.
Okay.
So it works.
Okay.
His freezer can go in there. He has to turn off about 4 5 p.m. It works. Our partners were talking of 10 kVA systems today. We're talking about 15 kVA systems today. Yes, they work. But back to the point I raised earlier, credit.
Hold on.
No, let me drop something. Let me drop something here.
Okay.
Now, then there's the efficiency of the backup.
Okay.
Because we've changed how many batteries this month? 3. So we've changed battery suppliers, right? Because you're a businessman, you want to optimize your profit, right? So you're seeking the best possible battery systems for the best rate. Even though you know there are bigger batteries that can give you a lot better. But as you push that number up, your cost per unit goes higher.
So I wanted to stop on the technology, the technical, right? So what we've heard is that solar home systems can actually power your life.
Yes.
Everything you need in the house,
yes,
you can power through solar.
Yes.
Not to promote a different company, but there's another company in Abuja that's built an estate that is completely cut off from the grid. So if you visit the estate, there is no light, there's no line running in from the pole into their house. And I've been there myself. All the ACs in the house work, the fridge, the freezer, everything works.
Yes.
So we've crossed that barrier that it works technically on the solar home system.
Yes, it does.
Mini grids. What are mini grids, and does it work technically?
Okay. Mini grids are a smaller grid. The grid that we are familiar with, just like our national grid, covers a whole lot of area. But the mini grid covers a particular, probably an estate, the community, and when we talk about mini grids, we can start talking about different types, interconnected and under grids. So mini grids is just a smaller.
So a bank of solar panels
with solar farm and battery storage with the grid lines,
okay,
is a mini grid.
Connecting the homes in that
yeah.
Okay.
Does it work? Yes. And one nice thing about mini grid is that it is scalar, it's modular, and it's scalable. If I have a 24 kilowatt mini grid system and I design my distribution network to be able to accommodate 100 kilowatts, I can scale up that system within days. And that's one nice thing about mini grid. The mini grids we have in the north power as far as welding machine. We have productive users. And one nice thing about mini grid is setting up a mini grid will target productive users. So we have welders that use the mini grid. We have those that have their grinding mill. So we boost the local economy and then make everybody comfortable so as to generate, so that they will generate revenue not to pay us back for the energy they bought.
Excellent.
So the mini grid works fine.
Excellent. Actually, I visited one of your projects in Izant, in Niger State, and it's quite impressive. Rural community, far from everything you know, but they've had uninterrupted power for about 3 years now.
Sure.
Yeah. But we'll get into how much they pay for the power, which is where I know many people are looking. But before we get into that, but the relationship that ADC has with GBE, can you share some numbers in terms of how does their power, the power they generate, compare in terms of cost to what you're getting from the grid?
All right, so thank you very much for that. I think the interesting thing is for every mini grid developer we have interacted with, they have all proposed a unique model.
Okay.
Right. So and for me, it's quite exciting. The amount of mental rigorousness. But I will tell you, before we walk out of this room, somebody has a variant to that model as well. So the interconnected mini grid solution that we already signed the agreement on, it's one that has helped GBE to actually design their systems, all right, optimally. So we have a schedule of power supply. So from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning, the system will take priority from the grid.
Okay.
Okay. From 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. right? The system, to 4 p.m. the system runs entirely on solar energy provided by GBE. And then we now kick in again from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. We need to also give priority to our supply. And then overnight, we will supply as available. So there actually are agreements to commit, to SLAs on this. Now, what this is doing is that overall, the efficiency translates to the unit cost of the energy.
Yeah.
Now, if you can have these guarantees, then you probably can economize on your storage systems. You can design your hybrid systems so that ultimately the customer gets value. Now, to speak to numbers in another way, if you're talking about an upgrade, interconnected mini grid, I think the very first thing is to establish that there will be a willingness to pay. All right? And how do you determine that? You actually would compare what their current cost of generation is combined. So this is cost of self-generation and whatever they get from the grid. If you are able to match that or do a little bit lower than that, then you have a conversation. So before you even get on the road show and all of that, you must have an idea of this solution. So that speaks a bit to the number. just for more information as well. So there is that selling arrangement. So I sell electricity to GVE augments this and sell on to the customer, right? Am I happy trading with GVE? By all means, and I'll tell you. So the market has over 2,000 shops, right? So the cost to me today is I have to ensure I deliver electricity to the shops and then carry on revenue protection, isn't it? Everybody's consuming, paying, they're not stealing electricity and all that. Now, from this relationship, right, I can aggregate the over 2,000 customers to just 3 major customers, 3 major transformers within the market, right? So I have, rather than have 2,000 invoices or bills and all that, now I have just 3 bills at the transformer point. And also, I don't suffer unnecessary losses, right? Which is my current reality, isn't it? Yeah? So even if I take a concession on the tariff, if you actually do the all-in, sorry for the no pun intended. If I do my all-in revenue, the economics actually still works.
Okay.
Right. So in that sense, it's quite progressive.
Excellent.
And the final thing as well is I already have investment in the network within the market, right? So there's something which the regulation allows for interconnected mini grids, and that's a usage fee. Many others may know it as distribution use of systems charge, something like that, right? So this is also a compensation mechanism, right? That developer, you would have invested in this, which would have ballooned your development cost. But hey, it's already available, so you pay just a slight fee on top of this. I will tell you this, that all of this rolls together, right? It's still more favorable to the customer, right, than what their current cost is, even from grid and also from self generation.
Excellent. Now let me move. I know people are eager to talk about the financing, but I want to spend a bit more time on the few other things before we get to. So, what's the argument? What's the strong, compelling argument for renewables in a place that's sitting on a bed of gas and oil?
Okay. So let me take the counter side of it first, where you might be able to argue perhaps in these areas it's like you look the other way in terms of priorities. So but areas that are solidly on the grid that are underserved, in other words, the share of power that's going around is not reaching them, then you may well, the economic sense of it may well be to focus on a series of other issues. It's like whether those areas are metered up, whether that grid that's around there can really take power to all of those areas, or whether there are fundamental problems with that grid. If the answer is that you've got solvable problems on that site, then it's going to be logical for you to follow down that path with much more intensity than's been done in the past. And then at the other end of the spectrum, if you've got communities that are well beyond where the grid is reaching at the moment, then there's a very, very compelling case for looking at solar combined with other things, just based on simple economics, because the cost of rolling out a grid and is considerable. The competition for capital that's available to even develop the current grid that's there is significant. So if you're facing up to those communities that are well beyond the grid, it's a really solid case for basically saying in the next 5-10 years the smart thing to do is to get them across to solar.
Yeah.
That's been the conclusion in other countries.
Yeah.
I think what's really key is that in other countries there's a much steadier game that's just beginning here, where you have a positive relationship about an assumption that the grid will eventually reach there. And then the game changes from that solar generation that you have locally being the thing that you do exclusively to being something that complements the system and is feeding back into it. So it's unlikely to sort of go away. In terms of risks, so there are a couple of things. One that I think needs flagging is a quite political one in terms of people understanding power and it being generated. So in pockets across the Delta, you've got oil and gas companies providing power basically for free. And it's a system that doesn't work very well locally because it's like the willingness in terms of supporting all of that waxes and wanes. People's utilization of that power is horribly inefficient in most cases because if you're not metering it, it's like there's no reason to be switching off the lights. So in communities that are either there or near to that, there's going to be a question as to basically, hang on, we're in the Niger Delta here, there's tons of power under this. It's like, if you're offering us solar and then looking to charge us a significant tariff for that, it's like, do we want that?
Okay.
And the first proposition I put in that line is what that strongly suggests is that you're going to have to need a strong component of actual, but looking at options where there's really strong local stakeholders who've got a part in that, who basically help bring discipline to the question of how is this designed from the outset. It's like, are people ready to pay, and a clear understanding of where is this going in the future. Because the other thing is it's likely to start realistically with something with a significantly higher tariff.
Which will actually lead me to the next question, it goes to Chinedu. What models are you beginning to see in the solar home systems for financing acquisition? Yeah? So we've crossed the mental barrier, it works technically. Everyone knows it's a bit cost prohibitive, to acquire. Are you beginning to see any models emerge that would allow anyone who's interested, to be able to acquire this?
Okay, can I just bite into the last thing you said before?
Sure.
A fundamental problem which exists in the region, with respect to power as we see it today, is that these are economies, local economies in communities that have been destroyed over time. So even the purchasing power literally does not exist in those places, right? So there has to be some sort of multi-system approach to build local capacity, to enable the people to afford power.
Okay.
Maybe in some sense, some sort of off-taker arrangement with whatever they produce locally in those places to improve purchasing power.
Okay, hold that thought.
Yeah.
Because I know that in some of the places where GVE has put in mini grids, that these are back of beyond communities. Communities that do not have any real purchasing power, but the power supply that's coming to the community has allowed them to grow economic activity that's now allowed them to pay for the power. Is my conclusion correct?
Sure.
Yeah. So it kind of pushes that argument that maybe those communities cannot afford today, but if you put in the power and they use it for productive use, then they
value is created and then they could pay also. I'd like to hear that.
Yeah. Permit me to just chip in something there. So also from in our interactions with developers and also consultants, also working on the policy side with the regulator, there's a model which you can Google this one. It's called the Keymaker model, right? So there's this mini grid somewhere in South Africa, and what actually they have seen is that the community is a predominantly fishing community, so they fish. Now they built in the mini, and then the same developer invested in cold rooms, all right? So the fishermen were able to actually add on some value creation to the fishing activity. And over time, the revenue streams from the Keymaker model activity actually became more significant than the initial objective of just providing power. So I think this is the kind of creativity, and developers are encouraged to nominate or review your community and see if there are Keymaker potentials. I know of a developer who's talking about cocoa processing possibilities within a certain community. So I just wanted to chip that in as food for thought.
Excellent. We'll come to the audience in another second. We know how much the tariff is if you get grid power and what the mini grids are charging in multiples of what you pay if you got grid power. How is that playing out in terms of the economics of it? Because the core argument is that Nigerians cannot pay 150, 200 naira per kilowatt hour. What are you finding from your own experiences?
Okay, one of the key challenges we faced at the onset was the ability to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the people had the ability to pay, but not on the long time. The issue being that most of the appliances they had were not efficient. And so we thought of that and then began to think of a possible way of bringing down their energy usage. First and foremost, what we did was to give out for our first site, we gave out free LED bulbs. And then they had to compare on their own what they spent on their incandescent lamp and then the LED bulb. And our meters are structured in such a way that you can really monitor your consumption in real time. It tells you what you are consuming and how long that work will take you with your current tariff usage. So they saw the need to actually retrofit their equipment. And so when they want to buy the freezers, fan, they call on us to recommend. And in that way, we were able to reduce the electricity usage while still maintaining a tariff that's quite comfortable for us to make our case.
Okay, let's take a few questions and then we'll come back to the panel. SDN.
Used to be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used to be the country director of SDN, working with Mr. Chris Newsom. But I'm in the private sector now. Renewables and access to power. We've been talking a lot about solar. I'm involved in gas to power.
Okay.
But I know there are some peculiar circumstances in the Niger Delta. Chinedu said that as you come down from the north to the delta, the heat map goes to green in the Niger Delta. 4 to 5 hours, you said, per day.
Yes.
Well, Niger Delta, we've got water, lots of waterways and rivers. What about hydro? Okay. Wind. I know that offshore, around Brass, there are potentials there. So what are we doing about wind? What about biogas? The focus on solar obviously is very important. But let me end up by saying that yes, someone mentioned Niger Delta is still sitting on a whole lot of gas. And I think moving to renewables, we have to have access to the gas there. What do we do to tap into the gas already available in the Niger Delta to power the region?
Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Moderator, thank you. And kudos to the speakers. My comment question is simply this. What is the level of penetration of mini grids in the Niger Delta? Clement, I hear you saying you started something as an intern years ago. When you look back, how far would you say you have come in terms of penetrating the Delta? I say this because when I listened to Chinedu, I got the funny suspicion that for the moderator stopping him, he may have said something that may have stopped me from asking the question I was about to ask. For all of you there, what has been your experience with regards to security challenges in the Niger Delta? Because it is not just about the poor economies in the rural areas that as a challenge to what I suspect will be penetration of mini grids, but also migration as a direct result of insecurity challenges that businesses and even people residing in the rural areas face. How do you, it's one thing to say you provide power, but if the people you're providing power for are not there, or they feel unsafe going back, I mean, how do you balance that out? And then finally, for my friend from Abuja, and please ask, forgive me, I had to rush down from court, so forgive my appearance. I'm not here to judge you. to argue anything. I'm a user just like every other person here. And my apologies, my name is Tony Krukru. I'm a lawyer based in Port Harcourt. The National Electricity Regulation Commission is the go-to body when consumers like us have issues with power in this country. But increasingly, from my own very personal experience, I get the sense that enough is not being done internally to actually educate staff in how they handle the end user. Because you have provisions like there must be transparency. You must give us a bill that we can actually accept. I enjoy what Clement said. When you look at the bill, it tells you how the device you mentioned, it tells you how much, the meter, how much power you have consumed, and what of you. I'm sure all of us here have issues of, what do you call that thing? Estimated billings and things like that we have all kinds of challenges. And I'm not saying anything that is new to you. But perhaps being here today, there may be something new that happened yesterday that we're not aware of, that you could enlighten us on this issue. Thank you.
My question is on the financing aspect of the mini grids. First of all, in my opinion, I believe that the solar panels were designed, researched on and designed for European climates or American climates. When we come down to Africa, our climate is totally different. And when we are constantly importing these things down here, and we're talking about efficiency and production, we're not going to get more out of it. And at the end of the day, you observe that most of the mini grids are grants. So what is the ROI? What is the incentive for going into such an investment? If the already existing grids are coming from grants, that means there's no incentive for an individual to decide to go into such an investment. Then secondly, the battery part of it, storage. Because I believe if an ecosystem is being built, then the entire chain should be dealt with, not just the panels. So if we're going to be developing a solar ecosystem for Nigeria, for Africa, then we should talk about production, research. We should talk about designing for the African system. All of this importation, I personally don't buy it, because I feel they've done their research with their climate, with their conditions, and they've gotten an optimal solution. And we bring it down here, and we have issues. Then the issue of home systems and connecting to the national grid. I believe if the government could consider allowing the states to have their own systems. I heard, I don't know if it was true, a rumor that there was a time when there was power provided for River State and they were asked to connect it to the national grid. I wondered why that was done, because I understood that the power the project was enough for the Niger Delta. I don't know why they were asked to connect back to the national grid.
Developing renewable energy in a region that sits on top of hydrocarbons.
Yeah.
Presumably, the key response is the climate crisis. The fact that not just a settled science, but by definition, non-renewable energy will run out. So the future of the Delta's energy economy is, as a matter of fact, if it's going to have a future, renewable. And this is not just a political impact. It bears directly on the financial, economic viability, because you're going to increasingly have a policy framework which needs to involve subsidies technology transfers, and north-south investments.
It's Tunde, and I'd like to ask AEDC now. Are you questioning? I would like to ask AEDC, that's Mr. Bode, sorry. I've had discussions with the power generators and the transmission company, and it seems that they're all pointing accusing fingers at the distributors for so many reasons which I wouldn't like to go into right now. But I heard you say there's a scheduling arrangement by which you accommodate GV here. I heard you say that, although I don't have all the details in my head right now. But the point is this: one of the accusations, or one of the allegations from the power generating companies and transmission companies is that the discos are not even taking what is being generated. They don't even have the capacity to take what is being generated, which is what is leading to this power grid collapse, what have you. So how do you accommodate this interconnected mini grid when you have not even taken what is being supplied from the upstream? That's my question.
Chris mentioned the issue of perception and what effect it's had on all that we are trying to do to achieve this. And I wonder what is being done actually to change the narrative among people. But yes, among elites, but for the policy makers, the government end where some of these projects fail, what's been done to change the attitude, or that they will be able to achieve things that are more lasting, sustainable, and will be able to achieve the results that were intended for those projects. And then also, just like the lady here said, the policy framework for us to begin to see manufacturers who can come in here and provide a backbone for developers. Are there thoughts going on in this area about policy framework and all those kind of encouragement that can create a boost for this renewable energy?
Excellent. Totally very good questions. We'll come for a second round. And let me put that to you. Have you guys considered using, say, mini hydro or wind, empowering your solar, your mini grids?
The only option we thought of is using a combined diesel engine along with the solar in order to reduce the cost of the storage. Though we have implemented that way, we are working with General Electric to introduce a solution that might be able to harness the gas and use it if the gas is available, or use the diesel or whichever alternative means of generation is available. And then that will be introduced when the solar is not capable of sustaining the energy supply to meet the demand at the point in time. That's what we have been able to do so far.
Well, I know that there's a developer who's combined wind and solar. The developer in Abuja that's completely off-grid did a combined system of solar and wind. The wind panels, the windmills are on top of the roof, and they provide the power mostly at night when the solar battery storage has been exhausted.
And then to answer that question further, the use of hydro and some other means of energy generation, there are certain things we have to actually put into consideration. One is what someone actually mentioned, the issue of security. Now, who owns the waterway and how do we secure that? Our business model is designed in such a way that we work in line with the community, that the community themselves see the system as though they own the system. I would like to paint a picture for you what actually happened to me. One of the scenarios that visited the site without sharing them. I came there very late at night and I was almost killed. Reason is I was approaching the power house not knowing that the guys were not sleeping, they were gone. And at the point I was like, they were like, who are you? Why are you going to? I was like, sorry. Drop your bag, lie down there. I laid down and I thought they were criminals until one of them said, "Now engineer." So like, engineer, next time you are coming to our locality,
tell us we don't joke with this system. So we have developed a business model that is centered towards building local capacity. Almost the powerhouse, all the powerhouse, and almost all the installations they are being done by the locals. And so they see the project as part of them.
Let me go to Chinedu on the question on mini grid penetration in the Niger Delta, or even solar home system penetration. Yes. What are you seeing? Are you seeing an uptick in adoption, or what?
There's an increase in adoption, but I also think from experience, personal experience, that we need to start looking at combined systems where there is solar and then there's wind to support. Now, in this region, essentially, most times when you're losing solar intensity, rain clouds are approaching. And when rain clouds come in the delta, it comes with wind. So I think those systems will improve optimal time for those home users and make it a lot better for everybody involved.
Okay, but there's a question about, I mean, it's not completely related to renewables, but educating DISCO staff on how to interface with their customers. You should talk about that. But more importantly, the load rejection question, because that's something that's out there, that DISCOs are rejecting load, but you also talked about, taking load from a mini grid developer. So how does that work?
Okay, thank you very much. It's interesting that at the discussion around mini grid, integrated mini grid, a question will come out about estimated.
Can I just give that some grounding? Those of you who are here, it's like all of you live somewhere. Can I just show hands for those of you who've got a meter in the place where you're living? That's better than when I would have asked this question like a couple of years ago. But it's like there's a constituency for that estimated village.
So to quickly speak to this, right? And I think it's helpful if we engage this kind of initiatives, and try to balance these things out. So the systems being developed by the mini grid developers, I do share with my friends. These systems are most times more advanced than the central grid system, right? There's very clear transparency around energy usage, consumption, and all of that. Now, if you ask on the back of that, right, there's an investment, and if you have an upgrade side that is, selling at maybe 100 naira plus, there's a significant grant component, right, that's making even that 100 naira quite possible. So the question is this, right? There is investment that needs to be made. If the investments are not made, right, you are in a situation where your assets are really what they are. So the question around the estimated billing and the other things, these are legacy issues from the central system. All of this led to the privatization program, right? And if you actually read all the literature, right, and it's available, also try to Google this as well. There's nowhere in the world where suddenly privatization, without further government support or some grants, has suddenly transformed the power sector. Was still in Nigeria up to 1999, for over 40 years, there was no investment in generation assets, right? So there just isn't enough money in the world, right, to invest in the main grid and make it as modern as you probably have in the central grid. So there are teething issues, right? So these issues are being progressively dealt with. But roll this back. If you now have an operator who has gone to the community, working with the developer, and the community is happy, the developer is happy, and the distribution company is also happy. So really, who's complaining? I think that really is the question. So the issues are many, and a 5 or 10 minute interaction cannot speak to all the issues. But I think if there's progressive engagement, I think that should be acknowledged, and I think that's why we're here now. The other question around You know, also I struggle to see how this also ties in, but it talks about discos rejecting electricity, right? But now there's a conversation with a mini-grid developer. So I think we all need to step back a bit, and you know, it's an engineering question, right? If you see this entire room as maybe a disco franchise area, and each socket being representing an injection point, and that's how the country is, right? If there's a generator out there powering this room, and the socket supplying this air condition goes bad, right? There's an impact on the generator, isn't it? Yes. Now, the entire country is connected just like that. There are generators everywhere. And all of these are all connected. So for each distribution area, we all have connection to the 330 kV lines, 132 kV lines, and all of that. So believe it or not, interruption in Lagos can trip the circuit for me in Abuja, right? And there's a process to get this restoration back in line. Now, if I only just focus on this socket, and I say, this socket falls within your distribution area, there's generation, I can get the generator out there, but there's no supply at this socket. I can go to press and say, well, you refuse to turn it on, you refuse to turn it on, you know? So there's a whole lot of conversation around this. To bring this down home a bit, right? Your local supply point could also go faulty, right? It could be your transformer, right? If you have a disco that has a lot of underground cable investment, sometimes there's an underground cable fault. So if you sit at the transmission end and say, I am giving you electricity, and you point to a community and say, this community is on supply, you will not have told the complete story until you review all what you have there. So the issues are many. I don't think the trading blame is the progressive approach to resolving the issues, but I understand the frustration of the customer, right? I'm also a customer, right? I want reliability. And when I don't have that, I would accept whatever story it is that I have out there. So I think progressive engagement really is what the answer is to this.
Excellent. Let me come back to you again on the questions around solar panels designed in Europe. Are they less efficient, you know, when we import them into Nigeria? Or are you beginning to ask China and Europe to design specific, you know, for Nigeria?
A high-level partnership with some companies in China to actually manufacture panels for us, because we as a company cannot dive into all the sectors, manufacturing, and what we do is meaningful. Our constraint on that. Well, the solar panels that are being imported to this country might be slightly less efficient in the country, but the level of efficiency cannot be compared to the cost of actually setting up a factory to actually produce panels themselves. It's best for now to import, and then, for instance, if we are deploying the panel into the Niger Delta, we know we need more panels that would have needed in the north. So we design specifically for the region based on the panels and standard test conditions we were carried out before the panels were manufactured.
The lady spoke about this and asked the question. Interestingly, I and my team are actually speaking to a couple of people about starting panel production in Nigeria. And for me, what I realized is that it's not just about producing panels in Nigeria. A lot of manufacturers now manufacture for the tropics, right? All the way to even the Middle East. I like what you said about building the hub where there's production locally. But then I ask, when you talk about research, then you're talking about our universities, because you cannot do research in isolation outside of the educational system. How many schools produce, you know, you're already laughing. It's until we're able to clean up our institutions, research will be a pipe dream.
Our university should center on implementing our final project, because GV is a product of our final
You know, perceptions and all of that. There's a question on how do you manage perceptions about, you know, solar in some of these communities that are not elite communities. You know, so because really the people were I think who we're really interested in are the unconnected communities that have little or no access. At least that's where my core interest is. How do you even begin to shape their understanding of the potential, that's in solar or the renewables?
Our work with PHED has no direct connection with renewable energy because that has not been exploited in the region. But in terms of perception, there is, for want of a nicer expression to use, working in Niger Delta is hard. Changing perception of the people, either at rural or at urban areas, is difficult. One of the things that comes to mind is an event we had about 2 years ago in Akwa Ibom State where I was in the opposition at that event, and the chairman of Trade Union Congress stood up in all his glory and announced that he's going to appeal to the state governor that people of Akwa Ibom State should not be for power because they're the biggest oil producing state in Nigeria. People hailed. And I smiled at him and said, Oga, why are you appealing? Also appeal that you should drive me to a filling station, fill your tank and drive off. When you have people who think this way, it's difficult. Some of my colleagues from PhD are here, and we've been exchanging smiles as we've heard certain things here. And what this tells us is that some of the assumptions we've had as we're taking some of the programs to the next level are actually possible. Building ownership, building trust with the people, because they will always perceive you, like Chris has said. The lack of trust is also born historically because a lot of these projects have failed. So we must rebuild.
Excellent. If states produce their own power, I want to go to my Oga, who should be on the panel. Mini grids survive commercially without grants?
Sure. Mini grids can survive commercially without grants. GV can survive without grants. But what of the startups? You need grants to start up. So our first project was grants. And that was why we were able to distribute free bus. That was why we were able to experiment and see that it works. So yes, grants should be given on the short term.
Okay.
Not in the long.
Excellent. Why is it that states cannot produce their own power and serve their states, but must put it on the grid to be shared nationally?
Thank you, Patrick. This is an ambush. I wanted to come in quietly and go out quietly, but I'm proud of what you're doing to enlighten Nigerians about the subject matter of power. You're actually a leader in the process as we speak, because I followed your trend for a while. The issue of state involvement in power, if you ask me, is something people are shying away from. State governments are shying away from it. And it will only take one or two state governments to do the right thing, and everybody will rally to that direction. In a federation, the states take their space by challenging the status quo. In every federation, the states don't wait to be spoon-fed. Because if you wait to be spoon-fed, the federal government will spoon-feed you, and you will never grow to be an adult. So a state will say, no, this is as far as, this is what I want to do within my boundary. You are partially ring-fence yourself, come up with an economic model, and begin to invest in your economy, as if you are almost an island to yourself. Wherever you go out of boundary that is inconveniencing the federal government, of course they will step in. And then when you went out of boundary 10 miles and there was some intimidation, you roll back 2 miles, what did you do? You gained 8 miles, true or false? So state governments are supposed to stretch their imagination in trying to fill up the economic space. They don't wait for somebody to come from outside and give them something. I don't give you that background. For instance, look at the mini-grid developers. A smart state will have a pot of money and begin to nurture 2, 3, 4. Tell them, you go to the North Senatorial District, you go to the Southeast Senatorial District, you go to the Southwest Senatorial District. I'll put some kind of PPA with you that gives you a backstop, so you don't bear all the risk. In no time, the guy has hit the road and running. He doesn't even need any kind of backstop. And then there's utility out there. Everybody wins. So for me, it's more of lack of imagination, too much free money, not enough checks and balances from the assembly. Suddenly, you don't have much happening from the states. But we shouldn't give up hope. You know, with the future, anything is possible.
Excellent.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Well, I'm coming on for the EKK innovation. Good afternoon. Please, I'm actually very, very, very blessed to be around you guys, like James being here, because what you guys have said, in fact, my orientation right now has changed, especially the developer of the mini-grid. But I have a question, especially for you from I don't know, ABC. Exactly. Because I think one of the problems we have in Nigeria is always is the fact that we don't like competition. And I think, you know, at least my small 10 years, you know, being an adult, independent adult, I've seen that anywhere there's no competition, there is always the room to, you know. So, hitting the nail on the head, I want to know what you guys are doing. You know, why don't we have, like how the telcos have it? I can have like 3 different SIMs and decide to use whichever one I want to use. That's just the only question for you. Then, I don't know why I want to ask this, but I find something very amusing because I think the adoption of solar is conflicting when you don't want to go totally renewable in form of, what I'm saying, case study now, climate change. Because it's becoming very real to us now that, yes, the climate, you know, we have these issues. So when you say you're mixing solar panels and you're doing this, man, I don't know. I don't think it's a very, very good way. You know?
Excellent.
Thank you for putting this together. My name is Uche Anike. I run a project called Startup South. I'm interested. I've listened to all the conversations, and it's been quite some eye-opening for me. And what I'd like to connect, the initial question I had, Engineer Lex has actually hit some of it, but I'd like to connect some dots. She talked about the economics, you know, the fact that there's some sort of people are not able to pay for you know, power and all of that stuff. So there's economic capacity. He had talked about, you know, their experience where they have worked. I'm actually interested in GV is not a government-backed organization. They started as a small entity, a small startup. Ifani is a friend, close friend of mine as well. I'm just wondering, how possible, what is the possibility of, number one, supporting GV to do more of what they are doing?
You mean government support?
Well, all of it. Whether government, private sector, what's the possibility of supporting GV to do more of what they are doing? Number one. Number two, how do we create more GVs? Like I mentioned, I run a community of a lot of young people that are building startups, right? How do we support those people to be able to begin to provide these things? Chinedu works with one of our startups. He hasn't mentioned it yet. You know, I was expecting you to mention the name school and the research systems. They're a product of UNM in Nsukka. 5 of them built the team, and you know, you guys distribute their inverters across Nigeria as we speak. We should be able to highlight those kind of companies and let younger people understand that it is possible to build stuff in the power sector. Because the truth is that a lot of people feel that the power sector is a big space that requires a lot of money that they cannot get into. How do we begin to have that conversation that it is possible for young people to to aspire to solve problems in the power sector.
My name is Kule Kudaisi. Okay, looking at the cost per kilowatt hour, which I'm trying to start the project, and my joint venture partner are saying the cost per kilowatt hour is exorbitant. It's more than what you pay to PHDC and co. I'm just thinking, is the cost per kilowatt hour not supposed to go down after 4 or 5 years? For instance, can we model from experience? Can we model an intervention that look at grant support for the first 5 years, by which you will have paid for your capex? And the cost per kilowatt hour after 5, for instance, GVE, what you have in River State, cannot be costing us 100 naira per kilowatt hour now, after X number of years of doing it. Is there a way to tell that story to say, it's going to cost you 100 naira per kilowatt hour in the first 3 years? Can I get grant from government? Can I get grant from all? Can I get grant for this? To subsidize this, maybe to come to about 50, 60 to the consumer. But in 5 years, I will have paid for my capex. Then I'll only be adding add-ons as community grow, demands grow. Or I think that should come down. That's number one. Number two, looking at development in the solar, for instance, the Elon Musk UPVC, where you actually roof your house with the solar plate. I'm just wondering why we're not pushing that in Nigeria. So instead of me roofing my house and now screening it up with this and the roof gets, can't we, or is there a place where the UPVC is being tried in Nigeria? Does it affect the cost? Does it make it better? Is it efficient? Thank you.
For the tripartite agreement to be binding, there has to be an approval from NEC. I want to know how long it takes between the off-grid developer, the community, and the disco that has a license. There's a process where the tripartite agreement has to come into force. And then the issue of changing perception, like in the Niger Delta, taking Bayelsa for an example, over a decade or two, they produced their own power, and it was given free to the communities and individuals. Then the grid came. Yes, it did. Kolo Creek was available, and it was given free for a very long time before they were connected to the grid. And there's this issue of payment. And so there's payment apathy, even now that there's grid. So I believe with the mini grid, there should be a way for a gradual transition. If the government can have a way, they paid it for it all along, and now there is a grid and there's apathy. And there will be a kind of subsidy so that gradually over time, that culture will come to place.
Thank you for this program. Glad to be here. My name is Dr. T.A. Briggs, the Director of Offshore Technology Institute, University of Harcourt. I just want to mention some things the panel and players in the industry. I traveled to a country, an African country, and I find out that it's not everybody that are into the business of solar. You must be licensed to do solar. And they have categories of license, as a technician in technology and engineering. And one of the schools close by also operate a smart grid system. They get from the national grid in the night, in the afternoon, they sell to the national grid. And they always balance the sell. So, Ole and Co, so that's a possibility. The other thing I also want to mention, Climate do that they get a manufacturer from China and all that. I want to ask, your manufacturer, do you really do R&D and give him weather conditions for him to put his manufacturer's panel, solar panel and battery conditions? My brother was mentioning that it's the responsibility of the university. I want to tell you that the university have done some great jobs, but you know the problem we have is the political will to commercialize some of those things we've done. In my institution, we've done solar cooker, solar refrigerators and all that, and that's why Carbon Load Trust gave us a grant to run a master degree upgrade in upgrade energy, renewable energy, and we're working on that, and we've gone so far. So we've done a lot of stuff in that, but the issue is that you can't put the commercialization, you can't do that government need to buy, individuals need to, what we call investors need to, VCs, venture capitalists needs to be involved in those kind of ventures to do that. So that's that. Then, okay, let me just stress it there. So that's
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Uzo. So I'd just like to make a few comments and maybe ask a few questions too. So my first comment is that I'm grateful that we're having this conversation. Oh, okay. I'm grateful that we're having this conversation because many of us Nigerians are not so literate when it comes to issues concerning power. And that is the number one reason why solar home systems have not been working. People get them, people actually kill their batteries and then come back to the supplier and say, oh my goodness, you gave me something fake. No, they did not give you something fake. You plugged your pressing iron to your batteries and you killed it. Okay, then, secondly, to address the young man that said something about solar, like us combining solar with other forms of energy, and that is not, doesn't fit the climate change, whatever, narrative. First off, I think we should just get it into our minds that there's no one solution. There's no silver bullet that is going to solve climate change. That you switch to solar power and whatnot, renewables, won't solve climate change. It's a gradual process, and so solar is not a silver bullet. Solar is not Jesus Christ. It's not going to save the planet. Instead, changing our attitude and then collaborating with other forms of renewable energy. So there's biogas, there's natural gas, there's offshore wind. I'm not a big fan of onshore wind, so I won't name it. But there are other forms of renewable energy that can actually help us scale through this challenge. So when we say that you don't want to combine solar with solar, it doesn't really make sense. And then the last one is about universities and investing like young man as well as universities in Nigeria. They may not be the best, they may not be doing maybe world-class research or anything. But universities in Nigeria are very, very, very willing to collaborate with individuals. Yes, you have to go out of your way to find them though, but it's also your duty because you want to.
Everywhere.
Yeah, you have to. Okay, everywhere in the world. So you have to go out of your way to find what the universities is what you want the university to do for you. So like you want to improve efficiency of your solar panels. Like I wanted to improve the efficiency of my biogas systems. We went to the University of Harcourt, and they're willing to listen. So they have an institute that deals with agriculture and biogas research. So I'm currently working with them to carry out research. So what you can actually do is to take up sponsoring final year projects. So you have your project, you know what your project is, and this is how it works even in the developed world, even in the big universities. You have a list of projects. Submit it to the university and tell them that this is what you want students to do. And students will be willing because to do your final year project in Nigeria costs a lot of money because it's not for your school fees. You can pay out of pocket to do your final year project. So if someone is willing to sponsor you and just do the work and give the person the result, then you can vet the students yourself.
Excellent.
That's the best.
It's a great privilege being here.
Just the question.
Yeah, well, I do need to appreciate because I came here to steal this opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
I came all the way from Ibadan to learn this. And, well...
Okay, you can get 1 minute.
handling home systems, and a lot of people complain, like she mentioned, that these things don't work. But we have our own challenges when it comes to installations too. Installers, because they want to stay within budget of the customer, you compromise standard. They don't use breakers. I have installations that have been on for 3, 4, 5 years, and I've not had any issue with them, even with batteries. Because when you have the right breakers, it will trip off. Even presently, I'm having a case with the University of Ibadan, the VC's office. They've been complaining that their systems are not working. And they gave me a target that you must work within this range. And I said, I can't do it because I can't allow you to call me and arrest me. So we should have a control over those things. Installations that fail, there should be penalty to installers. I've always had dreams to go into mini-grid development. In Southwest, Oyo State, Ogun State, Lagos State, I can't count a single mini-grid operational. And you people are enjoying here in the Niger Delta in the north. Like this, my friend beside me is talking about gas. we should utilize it. There are generators that combine diesel and gas. I was in Power Nigeria, this thing is functional. So I want to talk about this, concern the question my brother asked you about distribution. Maybe they should target heavy users and allow mini-grid developers and home users to handle small installations. With that, we can utilize our solar very well in the afternoon, and the government grid will power industries. It will help the question my sister asked about production in Nigeria.
My phone lights, the phone touch to read because there's power failure. So my question is, what is the future of solar power? That's one of the questions. What is it? Because this is a regular NEPA, that one I just failed. That's my opinion. That one I failed. So what is the future of solar power in Nigeria? And again, how do we get young people in my school? My lecturer is here.
Your result is not out yet.
My school, they are trying. University of Whatever, they are trying. Issues of tomorrow. But in terms of when you want to sponsor people that will gather projects, University of Whatever is the best place. So the second question is, how do we get young people? Because I run a program for young people, get them to think about solar.
Excellent. Thank you.
Most of us were after profits, making money. You know, we tend to not educate people like energy management, energy efficiency. If you have to do this thing, those are the basic. You can't, someone just wakes up and tells you, oh, I want my 6 AC working at the same time, and then you just do estimated bill. It is your duty to educate the person about energy efficiency. NEPA or PhD or whatever, we are complaining about transformer blowing. It's because most times we overpower. Exactly, you know this thing. Now we have LED bulbs. You know the right thing, but because you're paying 1,500 naira every day, you feel you don't have prepaid meter, so I can on everything in my house at the same time, and everything is going to work. So the first thing first is energy management. You need to educate your clients. And then back to you, my brother, there's mini grid in the States. A steering group of companies, we operate on mini grids. Thank you very much.
A bit in line with the students, for the biggest risk I see for investment and attraction to off-grid is the grid itself. And why do I say this? Every 4 years we hear grid is coming. And then you wait for 2 years, it doesn't come. And then the next candidate start telling you again it is coming. You would think of investing in a system like that when you know that you can never beat the cost of the grid. Bola Ige tried a lot, Fashola has tried, Batanaji has tried, and at some point I'm convinced that even if you put me there, I won't solve it. So why don't we start accepting and educating people that grid has failed? There was a time in this country to make a borehole is like rocket science because there was water board. But today, does anybody have water problem around here? No. Borehole is 30K or something. So if the government is bold to say we don't have grid anymore, in fact, we will use the copper for aluminium for something else, you will see this solar will become really cheap, and people will go into it.
To the developers, is there anything you guys are really doing to secure subsidy in the power sector? Because I think subsidy is really required in the power sector, to not just the fuel subsidy and the subsidy. So, like, I was surprised yesterday when I saw the pages on newspaper that about 365 billion naira will give Nigerians meters, and we'll have a problem solved. But we'll ask ourselves, why is it not done? Because meter is the beginning of the solution to the problem in the power sector. Then again, I also want to ask another question, because we talk about solar energy in the south here, for instance, is probably because of the climate change advantage. Otherwise, we'll have gas. So, but we're also flaring gas in this place. So, if you're going into solar in order to reduce climate change problems, and you have a bigger problem, which you can also tap and it will be cheaper to use the gas that have been flamed to generate this go into this mini grid. It will be cheaper and it will be affordable. So I also want to ask, I don't know for the Abuja, I don't know how you guys have the PPA you have with the JV. So because you might see an estate, they'll say, okay, we'll be able to take maybe 1 megawatt.
I have the question from Kenneth. Why can't we have 2 or 3 telco sets? It wasn't too clear, but I think what you're trying to say is customers having the right to elect whether to go with the main rate supplier or an alternative supplier. So actually, the regulation and engineering there as well to also correct on that envisages a progression. All right, so there is a time, and it's by regulation, where the market will be fully mature. In that instance, it doesn't matter, you can decide to procure your energy from any party. But from elementary economics, in the network industry, you actually must retain at least a sort of monopoly around the network. Okay, there is no wisdom in having 2 wire lines coming out of your house. There will be a welfare loss in that regard. So it's progressive thinking. The law envisages that ultimately when you are not sophisticated, we should have that. There's a question of how do we support GBE so that we can get other startups. So I would encourage GBE, please tell your story a bit more. I think their story actually says how the evolution can happen. From interns, university projects, and all of that. I would take the opportunity to mention about grants as well. There's a lot of information available, that's true. There are grants available for mini-grid development. The Rural Electrification Agency actually is leading this grant. There's also a Rural Electrification Fund. So there's a government component, there's the donor multilateral agencies component as well. If you do some research, you will see that grants are available. Question from my colleague from Enugu Disco. That how long does it take to get a tripartite agreement approved by NERC? So it's a very interesting one. And I still give credit to NERC again on this. In the mini-grid regulation, there is a template tripartite agreement. It's almost like Control F and Control V on there. So you are reverting with a structure that they actually already proposed, of course with flexibilities around it as you want it. Since our engagement with GBE, we have had a series of interactions with the regulator, carry them along on the project, and also what the expectations will be from there. Just last week, the regulator actually sponsored a program to educate the sector on mini-grid regulation. So the process are quite simplified. There is a commitment on the back of the regulator that these are the rules, come to us. We would actually hear you out on that. So it's fairly straightforward from my view. Well, fine. So it's always the same question. There's a checklist. If you meet your checklist, right? You have all the questions answered. If you are not if your checklist is not complete, then you will have this interaction and engagement. But I would say engage the regulator. I'm not empowered to speak on their behalf, but I'm telling you that the process is very straightforward and there is the commitment on the other side. So it's hard to see how much you can go wrong. A comment on the possibility of net metering. I think you already have mentioned that. It happens in the advanced economies. Yes. If you generate more than you require, there should be a net meter where the utility can procure that from you. But let's bear in mind, these are features of more advanced grids. All right. So these are things that we can progress and get into. Maybe not now. The question around Disco should target large users and let mini grid supply the small users. I think that has been well answered as well. You see, let's really not get too sidetracked, right? The main grid will still be the catalyst for development.
Economic
right?
development.
Yeah. The interconnected mini grid will supply, augment, provide access to locations that may not be economically viable for Disco to extend the networks, network too. What's the future of solar in Nigeria? I think that has been said, the summary of the entire section. Challenge of network expansion, stifling interconnected mini grids. Okay, so I think that's a very good question. Again, I would say let's revert to the regulation. So the regulation, the mini regulation says if you approach the regulator here to express interest in an area, if the distribution company has not noted that location in its expansion plan, then you are very well okay. You will get registered or you will get a permit to actually develop those grids. Please approach the discos. We don't bite. This is the new testimony of that, right? If we work together and we co-develop a project, so what really is the concern that your business model will be stifled when the discos get there? I think that's all I have.
A mix of issues. Uche, I heard you. Key point trades. I heard you as well, and the gentleman over there. Personally, I think we're at a good phase, right? I'm sure I didn't try to imply that the universities are totally out of it. But the needs, the requirements of servicing the diversity of these customers, I'm sure the people from Stevens will also concur to that. There's a knowledge and social gap that forms a huge chunk of the challenge. Then, when you get into it, in terms of technology, in terms of know-how, in terms of the level of production required to serve capacities that Nigerian homes need today, it's not just a matter of bringing ICs together and soldering them. There's need for automation. Funding that is the biggest challenge that exists. Getting credit. I've never been a big fan of subsidies. But yes, I hear them talk about grants. But like the lady Uso pointed out, there's a need for building these relationships and starting from somewhere. Uche raised something. Yes, we're working with Green Age. And yes, we also face challenges. You know how many customers have woken me up at night? Your system is tripping, my TV is going off. Right? So, but when I say that, right, when we decided to get into that space, we did not expect a clean ride. We did not expect to get in and start reaping benefits immediately. In fact, when you're designing a product, Patrick might be living in a 10-bedroom duplex, for example. Patrick comes on your website and orders a 5 kVA system. And Patrick is in Asokoro, for example, right? That means, first of all, you must go to Patrick's house, take the measurement, design the system, and get back to him. I have a customer who has called to say, look, you guys, you're not serious. Da, 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 da. What does he say that? I have to travel on Saturday. You must deliver. And then you talk about the ones who tell you that if you add this one, can't you remove this one? Now, in the midst of all of this, let's not forget something as well. You also have staff to pay. So it's not about whether you want to cut corners or keep standards. It's a mix of issues that we all need to collectively deal with. And Uche, in line with what you've said, I think I shared that with Body earlier on in the day, there's a need for the tech space to hack power. And it's not about whether you're going to come and how do we bring people in. You see, these conversations, they are great, but we need to have more of these conversations in our system, in every ecosystem in the country. Because, like I love to say, every problem is local, and every solution must be local. Thank you.
So the one thing I'd pick up on is the what can states do to decide, and or rather what should they do. I think there's a need for them to face up to a very big picture where in the context they've got, there's a lot more energy in the Delta than they have taken seriously, that they've got a role to play in this, both on the renewables side and pardon me, on the non-renewables side. And that they've got to basically take a look at their map and realise that when it comes to solar alone, not speaking of other renewables, they've actually got a massive resource where things do turn greener down here, but it's still far more in the way of renewables than you'll see in many other regions in the world. The approach to recognise that in places like Nembe, Akasa, on the coastal areas in rivers, it's going to be very much more feasible to do things like combining solar and wind. It's like in other areas hydro might be possible, but to genuinely take seriously the idea of mapping what you've got, and then to take seriously the question of where can they take a lead. And with state governments, it's one where if they can take some of the lessons from the past, they've got assets that are just perfect for highlighting solar in many, many ways. So your average school operates from around 8 till 2 or 3 p.m. It's a perfect candidate for getting onto solar in the private sector. So to learn from that side and to look at where they can provide a platform for exposure, because we've talked a lot about sensitizing the public communities and ourselves about efficiency, the use of power and so on. Unless you get schools, institutions that government controls like health centres hooked up and on solar, you're missing a massive opportunity to create that interaction.
Thank you. So please, a round of applause. We did not in any way delude ourselves that we're going to find out the answers tonight. And that's why we planned this to be a 3-part series. So this is the first of 3. In a few weeks, we will announce the next engagement, and we hope that we're going to build on these conversations, and by the time we get to the end of the day, we will have some kind of direction on where we can take this stuff. But there's a lot of information that we shared tonight. I wish and hope that the universities will connect more with, Startup South and, some of the VC guys Chinedu works with, because there could be a lot in there. We could be sitting on gold mines, but, we don't know. I mean, this is an example of, one of those projects that's sitting in our very dusty libraries. Not Uniport libraries. But thank you for coming. Thank you for coming on time. We'll do this again, and you've been a great audience. Thank you so much.
Okay, what I know is that if both parties engage, there are regulations that allow for collaboration, and if you engage and figure out how to share value, there shouldn't be a problem. The people we brought on the panel today is GVE Projects, a separate private mini-grid developer, and the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company that has a franchise for the Abuja area. But they figured out how to work together, and they've worked it out where they take power from GVE during the day, and they give power to GVE in the evening. So it's a symbiotic relationship that allows everybody to profit. So I don't think there's a problem when people collaborate. Yeah. Thank you very much.